Continuing our tradition of honoring really special museums and museum exhibits, this year the Victoria and Albert Museum in London took our breath away with their Alexander McQueen Savage Beauty. Please welcome senior researcher from the V&A, Dr. Kate Bethune.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for inviting me here to LA. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Kate Bethune, and I had the privilege of being Savage Beauty's senior researcher. For those of you who don't know, the V&A is the world's leading museum of art and design. Our collections span fine arts through architecture, glass, ceramics, metalwork, fashion, and photography, to name but a few. And we welcome, on average, about 4 million visitors per year. I'm here to talk about Alexander McQueen Savage Beauty, which was our blockbuster exhibition of 2015. It broke all records in the museum's history. It was on display from the 14th of March through the 2nd of August, so 21 weeks. And in that time, it attracted nearly 500,000 global visitors from 87 countries around the world. Countless VIPs, including Kanye West, Kim Kardashian, my favourites, David Beckham and Benedict Cumberbatch. And they were lovely. And unprecedented media coverage. And for the first time in the museum's history, for the final 2 weekends, we opened 24 hours a day, so through the night, to allow as many people as we could access to this marvellous exhibition. What's interesting in listening to the other presentations from this morning is that there's a bit of a contrast with a museum exhibition and that we're capturing a moment. Many of your projects have and hopefully will have longevity. And there was something very special about capturing people's imaginations for this very short period of time. And it was a very emotional journey. It became my life for 2 years. I literally lived and breathed this project and did nothing else. And it was wonderful. I peaked too soon. I was 33 when this project went live, so I don't know what's going to come next, but we'll see. For those of you who don't know, Alexander McQueen was one of the most influential fashion designers of his generation. He provoked with his bums to trousers. He astonished with dresses made from glass microscope slides and razor clamshells. And he shocked with his powerful and spectacular catwalk shows, which involved elaborate storytelling, compelling theatre, and raw emotion. So there's this real combination of a technical virtuosity fused with an artistry with materials and showmanship. He was a masterful storyteller. So it was a real challenge to capture all of those elements. The exhibition was originally on display in 2011 at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. And it was a wonderful opportunity for the V&A to bring it home to London. London was so important to who McQueen was. He was born in the city. He was raised there. He trained on the prestigious Savile Row as a tailor. He established his business there. And it was a wonderful opportunity to give an entirely new audience an opportunity to see the exhibition. But it was also great for us to be able to go back to the beginning, to enhance certain aspects of it, to reconsider the design. You don't usually get many second chances, but for us we did. And I hope as I take you through it, you'll like what we did with it. The V&A was a very special place for McQueen. He used to come to the museum when he was a student and an early designer, and he would research in our archives. He was also involved with an initiative of ours called Fashion in Motion. Fashion is notoriously hard to display in a museum setting because it's meant to be worn, it's meant to be on moving bodies. It has a fluidity and a dynamism that you can't really convey on static mannequins. And so the senior curator of the McQueen exhibition, Claire Wilcox, established a program in 1999 called Fashion in Motion. And this is where we invited contemporary fashion designers to come into the museum and present one of their recent collections. And here you can see images from when McQueen participated in Fashion in Motion in 1999, and again in 2001 with his long-term collaborator and very close friend, the jeweller Sean Lean. We worked again with McQueen in 2001 for our exhibition Radical Fashion, which very much engaged with the new digital landscape that created a new world of creative possibilities. And the image you can see here is an image by Nick Knight, another one of McQueen's collaborators. And it shows the model Devon, who looks like a manga heroine. She wears a Xiongsan from McQueen's Le Poupée collection. And you can see how her face has been enhanced with digital technology. She has a clouded contact lens and a digital safety pin pierces her forehead. As I said, McQueen used to come to our archives quite frequently. He often used to have postcards of our 19th century dress on the mood boards that he used when researching his collections. And he was fascinated by 19th century tailoring. It appeared in every single one of his collections. And you can see an image of our old storerooms. Now, this is where he used to come, and he would be shown examples of our tailoring, but also white work, Russian embroidery, Parisian haute couture. The opportunity to go back and rethink the exhibition threw up some really interesting new discoveries, which again really reinforced that genuine relationship between McQueen and the V&A. You can see here there's a wonderful dress with a gold discharge print, and you can also see that it's actually a William Morris textile, which we actually have in the V&A's collections. So again, these really nice, wonderful stories that rooted the designer to the V&A. To walk you through the exhibition now, Alexander McQueen's Savage Beauty at the V&A was the largest ever retrospective on McQueen. It was also the largest and most ambitious fashion exhibition the V&A has ever staged. 266 garments and accessories were presented in a sequence of 10 immersive galleries. Each one had its own specially commissioned soundtrack. There were also installations, 35 film screens showing catwalk footage from his amazing catwalk shows. And the intention was that it would be dramatic, immersive, and spectacular, much like his catwalk shows. We start at the entrance gallery, which showed an image of McQueen that morphed between that of his face and a skull. It was a photograph that was taken by his nephew, Gary James McQueen, and it was a really important mood setter. McQueen often had a very gothic sensibility that permeated his collections, and the idea was that you were instantly being drawn into McQueen's creative mind. But it wasn't a depressing exhibition because McQueen's collections and shows were often about regeneration, transformation, and self-expression. One big change for us was the addition of a new gallery called London right at the start of the exhibition, which really positioned McQueen in his home city. And it told a story of the time before McQueen was famous, when he was without funds to invest in expensive materials and the elaborate shows for which he later became known, but a time when he was still driven by his raw energy and creativity. And on display were 10 garments, many of which had never been seen since they were shown on the catwalk, and many show the experimental materials and processes that he became known for. There was a dress made from laminated lace that was torn and shredded to expose the model's flesh, and also a top, a translucent polyurethane top, under which was a lock of human hair that had been stitched as a label into that top. So you can see he was embedding his DNA in his designs right from the early days. The bumsters were a design of his that provoked and caused sensation, and they appeared in his collections again and again in the early 90s. And he completely redefined the silhouette with them by raising that waistline below the hip bone. And Highland Rape, the collection that this image is from, caused outrage when it was presented in 1995, partly on account of a misunderstanding about its title. He was accused of misogyny, but in fact, McQueen greatly admired women, and he wanted to galvanise them with very strong designs. But Highland Rape for him was about the atrocities that Scotland faced at the hands of the British in the 18th and 19th centuries, or I should say the English, during the 18th and 19th centuries. And what you can see with McQueen is that the strong collections, the strongest ones, were those that he created a very powerful narrative about. And that was true right throughout his career. Savage Mind paid tribute to his masterful tailoring skills. So it was a gallery that had examples of his coats, his trousers, his jackets, his dresses. And as I said, he was trained as a tailor at the age of 16 on Savile Row. And then he went to the theatrical costumiers, Bermans and Nathans, where he learnt about historic dress in the context of theatrical costume. And here's some detail shots of some of the pieces that were on display in that gallery. On the far right is a detailed shot of the jacket of a lining from his graduate collection, Jack the Ripper Stalks His Victims, again that reference to the 19th century. And you can just see strands of dark human hair underneath that lining. Again, this sense of memento mori playing a very strong role and creating a very strong narrative that rooted the garments themselves to the collection. Romantic Gothic, by contrast, was filled with burnished wood and gilded mirrors, and it very much engaged with McQueen's Gothic sensibility, which was a recurring motif throughout his collections. His was always a very kind of theatrical, dramatic take on Gothic, and it was often associated with the melancholia that was synonymous with the Victorian tradition. The lilac corset that you see on the left here is a great example of that. Lilac is the colour of half mourning. Romantic primitivism was a completely new design for the V&A. It was filled with resin, bones, and skulls. The skull became a brand motif for the McQueen Company, but it also referenced the morbid preoccupations of much fine art in the 1990s and early 2000s, if you think of artists such as Damien Hirst. It was capped with this extraordinary video sequence by the film director John Mabry, and it showed a girl plunge overboard a ship into the sea and appear to drown. And as she fell deeper beneath the waves, the tendrils of her chiffon dress ensnared her legs and pulled her deeper under. So you thought she was going to drown. But true to the catwalk film, catwalk show that it was from, Iriri, the girl was saved and transformed into a beautiful Amazonian princess. And again, some detailed shots of some of the pieces on display, just to point out on the right, this astonishing dress that was made from a skirt of horsehair and glass beads on the bodice that were built up in layers, so it looked like it was made from moss or algae and that it was alive and growing. Again, really emphasizing the transformative qualities of his craftsmanship. And on the far left, I love this piece because it really shows how he mixed his metaphors and his inspirations. It's a jacket that's made from a skin, and then it has impala horns embedded in wooden blocks in the shoulders, and it's paired with bleached denim trousers, so 1990s street culture. And these designs in the gallery had lots of different materials: mud, skin, horn, latex. By complete contrast, again, Romantic Nationalism was a very majestic gallery. It identified strongly with McQueen's Scottish heritage. So 11 years after he presented that notorious Highland Rape collection, he returned to the theme with The Widows of Culloden, which was a very beautiful collection, albeit still on a very political subject, the Jacobite uprisings and the final Battle of Culloden. But this was following his time as chief designer at Givenchy. So this is where, spending time in a French atelier, he had developed a refinement to his technique and a real softness of touch. And also in this gallery were pieces from another collection called The Girl Who Lived in the Tree. So he also identified with his English ancestry. And as I said, McQueen was a masterful storyteller. The Girl Who Lived in the Tree was about a feral girl who left the darkness of the tree to meet a prince and be transformed into an opulent queen. This is a really important slide because it shows how McQueen worked. He worked with a cast of hundreds, and this is what was so important in preparing the exhibition. We worked in a very unconventional way. So rather than working with traditional exhibition designers and scenographers, we worked with McQueen's original team. And he also worked with people outside of the confines of the fashion industry. He worked with music producers, with film directors, with lighting directors. And this was what was crucial in making the exhibition authentic and impactful. These are the people who knew him best. They were his close friends. They really understood his visions for fashion, and they are what helped us to transform it into an exhibition format. The Cabinet of Curiosities was the heart of the exhibition. It filled our enormous North Court gallery, which extends to over 6 meters high, and it contained over 120 objects, garments and accessories, lots of showpieces, those difficult-to-wear spectacular garments that were created for the moment of a catwalk show, but never intended for commercial production. And it really paid tribute to McQueen's diverse and rich collaborations, which spanned hat designers and jewelers, to glass technicians, welders, even prosthetists. Two of the most important were Philip Tracy. You can see him here. I love this image because it's just such a poignant, very tender moment of McQueen preparing models before a catwalk show, in this case, the Widows of Culloden. And Philip Tracy was a very close friend of McQueen's, worked with him for years. Two spectacular examples of objects on display were the peacock headpiece on the left, which was made from driftwood, which he'd found when he was holidaying with Naomi Campbell in the Bahamas, and coral. And on the right, the butterfly headpiece, which is actually made from hand-painted turkey feathers. Sean Lean, another very close friend of his, McQueen was so special as a person because he really encouraged people to push their own creative horizons. Sean Lean was trained as a fine jeweler and goldsmith, and prior to working with McQueen, the largest thing he'd ever made was a diamond tiara. But here he was compelled to push his own horizons, and he ended up creating the most spectacular and iconic body sculptures, such as this aluminium coiled corset that you see on the left. And I love the necklace on the right. It's actually made from Tahitian pearls, but a collar of lacquered pheasant claws. So that wonderful combination of organic materials, one ostensibly beautiful, the other vulgar. And it shows how McQueen often sought inspiration and beauty in the unconventional. McQueen was a masterful showman, and he really set a new precedent for what could be achieved in the realms of a catwalk show. And this is taken from the finale to his number 13 catwalk show. It shows the model Shalom Harlow, who was stood on a rotating wooden plinth. And going back to the idea of car robots that we heard about earlier from Ford, this was another application, but in the context of a catwalk show. She stood in between two, this time Fiat car robots, and rotated as they spray-painted her dress live in front of the audience. And no one had ever seen anything like this before. It was so groundbreaking and new. And it shows the emotion that was invested. And it was inspired by contemporary artist Rebecca Horn and her sequence High Moon, which involved two rifles firing red paint at one another. Again, another iconic installation that we recreated was the finale to the Widows of Culloden catwalk show, where Kate Moss appeared as an ethereal apparition on a glass pyramid at the centre of the catwalk. Romantic exoticism paid tribute to McQueen's avid interest in Asian textiles and dress. Each piece was placed within its own rotating mirrored recess, showing infinity views of the pieces. And this is one of the most spectacular that was on display. And it shows this, again, the remarkable artistry with materials. It's a dress that's made from embroidered panels of a 19th century Japanese silk screen, and it sits atop a dress of lacquered oyster shells. It's absolutely astonishing. Voss was another one of McQueen's most notorious catwalk shows. He always wanted to provoke a very strong audience reaction, and he achieved it with Voss. It was set inside a glass cube. The alternative name for the show was the Asylum Show. And as the models came out, they appeared trapped inside this cube, so trapped inside McQueen's creative mind. And they pressed their hands up against the side. And as the catwalk show came to an end, another glass cube at the interior smashed and revealed the image of Michelle Ollie, the fetish writer, who was laying naked on a shalong, masked and attached to a breathing tube while moths fluttered about her. And it was a recreation of Sanitarium, a photograph by one of his favourite photographers, the American artist Joel Peter Witkin. And it was a commentary on the politics of beauty, again, seeking beauty in unconventional places. So a bit of a jab at the fashion industry, which has seemed to be very superficial. Romantic naturalism contains some of the most beautiful and fragile and vulnerable pieces on display. On the left, we had a dress that was crafted entirely from pheasant feathers. Each feather was individually stitched onto lengths of ribbon, which was then applied to a net ground. When I held it in the archive, it literally is weightless. It felt like you were holding a baby bird. And on the right, a dress made from stripped and varnished razor clam shells, which McQueen once found when he was walking on a Norfolk beach. And he decided that they'd outlived their usefulness on the shore, so he collected them and made a dress out of them. And then in the moment at the catwalk show, the model Erin O'Connor ran her hands up the dress and sloughed them off to the floor, and they clattered and smashed. And then the piece was lovingly restored and able to be put on display in the exhibition. And here are some more images of that beautiful gallery, Naturalism. The dress second from the left is worth pointing out. It's from a collection called Saraband, and it was made from real and artificial flowers. And in the catwalk show, fresh flowers were used, and as the model walked, they fell to the floor, exposing the transience of living things. And again, it was inspired by contemporary artist Mark Quinn, his installation of flowers called Frozen, and Sam Taylor Johnson, who was another photographic artist whom he admired. The finale to the exhibition was Plato's Atlantis, and as I keep mentioning, McQueen was a masterful storyteller. Plato's was his most fantastical. It predicted a future world where the ice caps had melted, the seas had risen, and man had had to evolve in order to survive under the waters. So this kind of Darwinian post-apocalyptic narrative. And in this collection, McQueen perfected the art of digital printing, which you can see in the dress on the right. And it was also the collection that launched the iconic armadillo boot, the 30-centimetre high shoe that was entirely without reference to the natural anatomy of the foot. It fused a claw-like menace with a ballerina on point. And it was also a collection where McQueen broke new technological ground by teaming up again with Nick Knight to produce the show and live stream it. The first time a fashion show was ever live streamed on the internet was with this show, Plato's Atlantis. And you can just see the mannequins. We worked with a special effects company, Souvenir Scenic, Asylum for the mannequins, sorry, and they created these wonderful mannequins that mimicked the models. So as the catwalk show progressed, the models' features changed, their cheeks were enhanced with prosthetics, and their hair was sculpted into fin-like peaks. So we tried to convey that in the exhibition. There are some aspects of a legacy that lives on from the exhibition. It was very sad when it came to a close on the 2nd of August last year, but we embarked on an entirely new publication. It involved 28 authors, and it included longer essays on subjects such as McQueen's tailoring and his love of the animal world and the natural kingdom, punctuated with shorter feature spreads that engaged with topics such as his use of religious iconography in his designs. So that's one great legacy. The other one is the website, which is still live. You can get a sense of what was included in the exhibition. There are some interactive and innovative pages that you can delve into, discovering more about the objects and the process of the exhibition. And also, for those of you who didn't get to see it, and I know that this is, a poor second to actually having seen the exhibition, I gave a Periscope tour. It was terrifying, but it went okay, and that's still on the website, so you can actually get a sense of what it was like to be inside Alexander McQueen's Savage Beauty. So thank you so much for listening to me this afternoon. I'd be delighted to take any questions if anyone has any. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Ian Klein, freelance creative director. Can you talk a little bit about how the archives are set up and how the storage works for all these works dating back so many years and preserving them?
At the V&A? Yes, I mean, our collections, just to talk from a fashion point of view, span Coptic textiles from 2000 BC through to cutting-edge contemporary fashion. We have 2 million objects at the V&A, over 100,000 fashion objects, and only 10% of our collections can be on display at any one time, so most of them are kept in the archive. Any member of the public can make an appointment to see anything that we have in our collections, and depending on the materials, they are cared for in different ways. So we divide our collections according to materials, so fashion would be stored separately to, say, glass or metalwork. But as you probably are aware, fashion is a very versatile and diverse medium. So the challenge, especially with contemporary garments, is the new materials that we don't yet know how they're going to survive over time. So neoprenes and plastics that are now being used in fashion. So it's presenting some interesting challenges for our conservators, because also you have to think about authenticity and whether we present something as it was originally made or whether we present it as it has changed over time and adapted to its because of environmental conditions. So it's static and ever-changing, and there are lots of different schools of thought as to how that should be handled.
Your presentation was pure poetry. It was
Thank
really
you.
wonderful. I love listening. My interest in question is around your process of being able to take this imagination that is behind these artifacts, but then make it that experience. What's your process of making that like an experience, and particularly the challenge of taking this imagination and bringing it alive and immersive?
We were really lucky to have such a wonderful subject matter in Alexander McQueen. As hopefully I've conveyed to you, he was such a complex designer who had many different facets to him. What was so important for us was, as the curators, I mean, it's a wonderful, a great job to be able to work with these objects, to have unprecedented access to the Alexander McQueen archive, to source that content. But for us, the creative process was all about, and it pivoted on, working with people like Samantha Gainsbury, who was the show producer who produced many of his catwalk shows, the lighting designers that he worked with, his stylists, to really understand him, and that was the key thing. I think we don't know what he would have made of the exhibition. I'm sure many of you are aware, sadly, he committed suicide in 2010. But working with these people, we hope, enabled us to make sure that it was as authentic as possible. And it was a leap of faith for us because we tend to, as a government-funded museum, have to work in a very set way and put contracts out to tender and work with set sorts of exhibition designers. And this time we kind of threw caution to the wind. We knew in advance that it was going to be successful, so we could take more risks. And we hope that we know that it really paid off. But I think the interesting challenge for us now, I don't know if many of you know much about the V&A, but we have a great portfolio of exhibitions, and many are still on tour. I'm sure you've heard of the David Bowie exhibition. That's also one of ours. When you keep producing very successful exhibitions, it's a real and exciting challenge to work out what comes next. And this exhibition, more than any others, has really made us think about the powers of immersive scenography, of working outside traditional museum partners to work with the creative individuals in their respective industries and to really push the boundaries as to what can be achieved. But at the same time, harmonizing that with thorough, grounded research and a scholarly approach. So we're producing intellectual content, but we're presenting it in a very dynamic and immersive way.
Kate, this is a room full of designers and conceptors. Could you maybe go back for the couple minutes that remain and talk about the process by which the final design of the exhibition got developed, approved, and then built and installed?
Sure. So for the V&A, we turned this exhibition around in a little under a year, which was frighteningly little amount of time. We had a great skeleton of the exhibition to work from and a great design in some respects to work from before. Working mainly with Samantha Gainsbury, but also Joseph Bennett, a production designer who came up with a lot of the sets. And our role as curators was to really work with the production designer and the producer to marry up the content with kind of a visionary approach to really going beyond, taking the risks that museums never normally take because they're very safe. So we would have a series of meetings. We would blue sky thinking to begin with. We'd work out the sections of the exhibition that we thought needed to be enhanced or completely changed for our visitors. And a really good case study is that cabinet of curiosities, which doubled in size for the V&A. And it was so special to be in that space and see visitors come in as they saw, they were completely surrounded by 4 walls of moving objects, of 33 film screens showing images of those catwalk shows and moving footage of the catwalk shows. And again, to really bring that sense of dynamism that comes with a catwalk show that you can't usually convey in an exhibition format. So it was all about conversation, it was all about dialogue, it was all about taking 3 steps forward, taking 2 back, and reworking things, and feeding in ideas. And the idea to change the Primitivism Gallery came from the curators, and to make it about bones, and to really capitalise on that McQueen skull. And also, it was inspired by the catacombs in Paris, which was another place that McQueen loved. So what was really difficult in the creative process was drawing parameters and reining things in. There were so many objects, there were so many ideas. McQueen drew inspiration from so far and wide. The real challenge was to harness those different inspirations in a very coherent way. And that's what was achieved by working very, very closely with the production designer and the producer.
Fabulous. Everyone, let's thank Kate for coming all the way from London.